with Caesar? Caesar?
Yes, hello.
Hello, sir.
Hi. Oh, I'm so nervous.
Why are you nervous?
I,
Are you out and about when you shouldn't be? Will the Gestapo get you and put you away
No.
for breaking quarantine? Do you have your papers? Sorry.
No, I am actually inside. I've been inside for quite a bit.
Well, I'm
But
sorry.
I do have to work.
Yes, well, that's good. If you can still work, that's the important part. About a third of our fellow
Yes.
citizens won't be able to do that very soon. So, anyways, literary criticism. What can I do for you?
Yes. So recently, I've been taking a class on Luke and Acts, and the professor is big on this literary criticism, and he sometimes calls it reader response criticism.
Real response?
Reader response.
Reader response. Okay.
Yes. And so recently the class, some of the stuff that he says in class, he talks about how, like John the Baptist was a promoter of social justice, that Luke never mentions John actually baptizing Jesus. He puts Luke late first century, saying that he borrowed from Mark and Q. Actually, today in class, he said that in Luke, Jesus' death does not have. Luke never mentions that Jesus' death has atoning significance.
Right.
And I wanted to ask if any of this is actually valid, if it's actually like some of the stuff that he says really confuses me. Like, is this really what, I guess, scholarship is? I mean,
well, it's what
Mark was wrong in his ending.
Yeah, it's what modern scholarship is. It's when you are willing to take the text apart, ignore its own context, assume that one author, for example, will contradict himself. Start with the assumption that whatever has been believed in the past isn't right. So you can look at Luke Acts and you can take it apart, even though you don't have any manuscripts to do this. You don't have any historical hard documentation that does this. You can theorize. So almost any modern commentary, not all, but almost any modern commentary you're going to pick up, whether it's on Luke, Acts, or John, or whatever, is going to indulge in various theories of redaction criticism. And so, for example, when you look at John, well, maybe there was an earlier version of John that didn't have chapters 14 through 16, and that got added in later. And so therefore you can theorize this, you can theorize that. And when you're looking at Luke, Luke's a little bit tough because he obviously knows his history really well and is obviously using external sources. But because he says he's using external sources, because he's collected eyewitness testimony and stuff like that, then you can start taking it apart as to, well, maybe this represents this source that Luke depended upon, and maybe this represents this source that Luke depended upon. And then someone else will come along and say, no, I'm going to come up with a different set of indicators of sources, and then you can get published doing that. And this is what you find in most modern commentaries is not a whole lot on the actual meaning of the text or how what Luke says is relevant to what Paul says in Galatians or anything else. It's this kind of stuff. It's redaction criticism, form criticism, not textual criticism, mind you. That's different. Textual criticism has actual hard manuscripts where you can look at what manuscript says and what another manuscript says and deal with variant readings and things like that. When you're dealing with redaction and form criticism, you're dealing with theories about materials we've never seen and probably won't ever see because it's all theoretical. But it's all based upon the idea that, well, what's been believed in the past can't possibly be the case. And so we are free to create contradiction and error wherever we want to see it. And we will never, ever give the author the benefit of the doubt. No. If it's a biblical author, the assumption is that he's wrong. And because Christians down through for 2,000 years almost have been explaining alleged contradictions and things like that. We've already had all of that. We don't need to do any more of that. The assumption is everything is a mess. And so you can delve into mythical sources and influences and all sorts of stuff like that, and it's how you get published. And so when someone says, "Well, Luke doesn't have X, Y, or Z," so the assumption there is, well, Luke doesn't have as developed a atonement motif as John or Matthew does, and so if you then buy into literary dependence, which your teacher obviously does, and large majority of scholars do, you now have to explain that because he's got Mark, it's in Mark, so why isn't it in Luke? And so now you get to be a mind reader removed by over 1,900 years from the author. That's lots of fun. That gets lots of articles written and books published, and that's just a gold mine when you start trying to be a mind reader. And that's why I've always said, starting with literary dependence, saying that Mark is first, Matthew and Luke both have him and change him, and John doesn't know what in the world's going on, raises far more questions than it ends up answering. But it does allow for a lot more writing of articles. So there you go. So what you do is you mind read Luke and try to come up with a set of sources that maybe Luke would have had that would explain something like this. A lot of people would say, well, that shows that the salvific motif only existed within a part of the Christian movement. Because then you bring Bauer in, and Bauer, of course, his theory was that the early church was a mishmash of 47,000 different perspectives, and only over time did the Orthodox eventually win out. And so you can find you can divide stuff up in a million different ways. And yeah, that's what scholarship looks like. If you go to SBL, the Society of Biblical Literature meeting, which that's one meeting I wouldn't mind getting wiped out by the pandemic thing. That would not cause any harm whatsoever if that got canceled. But if you go to SBL and you look at the topics and you go listen to the stuff, this is all you're going to hear. That's why they're there, is to write stuff like this, and it ends up going every which direction. And so it's very confusing, no question about it. And it's confusing for a student to have to try to dig through all this stuff and then find the older voices or the still sane voices that will say, well, let's look at this and let's not start with a set of assumptions that all these people had no idea what they were talking about, contradict themselves all the time. Let's actually think about what if this is what Christians have believed it was. And let's look at it that way. Oh, wow, a lot of these issues just disappear immediately. Isn't that interesting? We're still out here. That literature is still out there, but it is the market is flooded with a lot of other stuff. And I went to a seminary. My first master's degree was from Fuller seminaries, and I had to learn all that stuff. I now know why I had to, many years later. But I had to go through that stuff. So you're not the first person to have to run into all that stuff. But you can still learn from those courses. It sounds like it's an online course.
No, this is actually a course at I'm a student at Boston College.
Boston College?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so the liberal Jesuit school.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I'm like the one conservative reform student there.
Yeah.
And I just like look at my classmates. I go, you guys really believe this stuff? If you go this direction, you're gonna not end up believing the Bible at all.
Oh no, they well, that's just it. Boston College has been so far to the left. I've said many times on this program that if the Pope ever gets around to excommunicating everybody at Boston College, then I'll think he's serious. But till then, I'm sorry. Every Roman Catholic that goes, well, we all believe the same thing. I go, yeah, right. Been to Boston College recently?
Exactly.
I mean, you're running into the bleeding edge of liberal Roman Catholicism at that point, and yeah, that explains everything. That's definitely where they're coming from.
Yeah.
That's definitely where they're coming from. No two ways about it. So, go get yourself some Michael Kruger books. Dr. Michael Kruger is the president of RTS in Charlotte. Pick up some of his stuff on the church in the 2nd century or on the canon and stuff like that, and you'll discover there are still folks out there that can handle all this stuff quite well and don't have to worry about it. Okay?
Thank you very much, Dr. White.
All right, thanks, and stay well over there in Massachusetts.
I'll let you know also that the next class has to do with something called Christian communism. Looking at the Book of Acts.
Okay, well, I'm glad you're getting a degree in fiction. All right, we'll see you, man.
Thank you very much.
Okay, all right.
Bye-bye.